Good evening. This is Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills, presenting clear thinking on confusing topics in challenging times. This is Monday, September 16th, and we are 49 days out from the presidential election, with ballots dropping by mail in many states in early October, even almost next week, I believe. Today, we are talking with Jess Craven, who writes a popular Substack called Chop Wood, Carry Water, and has been tracking the state of our democracy since 2016 on a show called Democracy on the Line, Realpolitik, Harris, the Democrats, and Trump. Jessica Craven is a community organizer, activist, mom, and elected member of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. She's also the author, as mentioned, of Chop Wood, Carry Water, a daily actions Substack newsletter that's been published 5 days a week since November of 2016. And it has 30,000 followers now. She's a delegate to the California Democratic Party, a climate activist, and a grassroots volunteer who has helped hundreds of progressive candidates win their races. She's also a political TikTok and Instagram content creator, which is where I discovered her. Welcome, Jessica Craven.
Hi, Amy. How are you? Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, sure. I'm so happy you could join us. I really appreciate all of your work, and I'm curious about how you got started. You started, I guess, the Substack back in November, and I'm guessing what the impetus was, but I'm wondering, you know, what moved you and how the development of the Substack started in your Instagram following. I don't know if you started on TikTok first or Instagram, but how did that all get going?
Yeah, well, I actually started, first I did the newsletter, and that started actually on MailChimp and then moved over to Substack later. And then around 2020 ended up on TikTok, which was really quite accidental. And then from there went over to the other platforms. But as far as the newsletter goes, like many people, just the Trump election, the shock, the horror, and a feeling of I have to do something. And then sort of realizing that not only did I feel better when I did stuff, but I felt better when I was able to help curate those actions for other people. And so I started doing that in a newsletter that just went out to a couple of family members and friends, and then started getting bigger and grew to what it is today. Moved over to Substack a few years back. And yeah, it's actually picked up a lot of readers, especially after January 6th was when it really exploded.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Like what were the numbers before January 6th?
I mean, I think, there were so many daily actions newsletters in the era of Trump. So I probably had a couple thousand subscribers, and, they were very dedicated and they took their actions every day, but it was not it wasn't a huge production. And then January 6th happened, and, I started building exponentially. I'm not sure why. I think a lot of the other action newsletters went away when Biden won, because I think there was an idea that maybe we were going to be fine. Yeah. And which was mistaken, but, understandable. I think we were all hopeful.
Right.
So there weren't as many newsletters. And I got Robert Hubble, who's got a big Substack, recommended me, and it just started building. And I think that with the increasing attacks on our democracy, there's been a feeling of where do I go to find out what to do? And, and there I am sort of offering, trying to offer some easy steps that people can take. So,
yeah. And I think also that a lot of our listeners aren't so familiar with TikTok. We probably have more older listeners than younger listeners. And there's a sense of like TikTok is kind of a joke and not serious, and don't get your news on TikTok. I wonder if you could speak to that. Like, how has it been for you to get on TikTok, and has it been rewarding? Do you feel like you've actually reached people? How many? I actually didn't see you on TikTok. I saw you on Instagram, but how many followers do you have on TikTok?
So I have about 386,000 followers on TikTok.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a decent number. I mean, look, if anyone who's not on TikTok, by the standards of TikTok, that is a decent following. But there are people there with millions and millions of followers. So it is but I am also a middle-aged woman who barely wears makeup, and I am not your average TikTok content creator.
Right.
But It was really accidental. I had never been on TikTok when I went to make my first video there. I had a friend who was really into it, and she said, you should go there and talk about politics the way you talk about it to me, because she was somebody who wasn't super well versed in politics. So I would try to explain things to her.
Yeah.
And she said, you should go do that over on TikTok. And, I went over there. I think the idea I had was I was going to try to recruit some phone bankers for the 2020 elections. I was trying to recruit phone bankers for President Biden. And I found that there was an audience that was extremely thirsty for information over there. And so I have stayed, and now I also post on Instagram and YouTube and Threads, and, I try to post in a bunch of places. But I have a real soft spot for TikTok because people are really hungry for political information there.
They are. It's amazing. It's actually quite surprising. There are people who explain things in depth. There are people who do like 10-minute videos on TikTok.
Yeah.
And, I'm on TikTok too. I don't have the kind of following you do, but I recently posted like a series of slides about J.D. Vance, and it went to almost 100,000 views. Like that was a lot for me,
Yes.
and so I was happy. I was like, I'm glad, that this got out, because that's sort of what you want, is for your information to get out. Do you get pushback from MAGA folks? Because I get trolled sometimes. I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I am a fairly ruthless blocker.
Yeah.
Because the information that I am trying to give out is to help people on the left win.
Yeah.
And I'm not a huge believer in I don't think that a lot of those trolls are even real American citizens.
Yeah, right.
I've been very, very skeptical about who is actually on, in the comments for a long time.
Yeah.
And some of them obviously are very real, but in general, I don't know that engaging with them is going to help me or them. And if they start calling names or insulting or ad hominem attacks that go to my appearance, they're just blocked. I block very quickly.
Yeah.
So actually, it's pretty nice in the comments, because for the most part, people are there to learn, and they're there to learn either what they can do, or it's like you say, some of my most popular videos have been like 5 or 6 or 7 minute explainers about like Supreme Court cases. Or I did one last week that was about the budget process right now and the SAVE Act, and it's being attached to this continuing resolution. And I was like, I don't know that anybody's going to be interested, but they are. It's got like 350,000 views now.
Wow.
Like, people are very interested in having the workings of government explained to them in a way they can understand.
And that is one benefit, I would say. I was thinking about, as you do. I mean, I do this as well, and that's why we have this radio show and podcast. We think about politics. And the election of Trump has had the one beneficial effect of, all of a sudden, a lot more people know about politics. A lot more people know about the Electoral College, not only the Electoral College, but the history of the Electoral College and why it's hurting us, as well as the number of representatives that each state has in the Senate, for example. So, I mean, that's pretty wild that people are now really, really kind of familiar, which is good, which is a good thing. We just hope it's going to push us over the edge here, right, to get past the MAGA movement. And I wanted to, there are a couple of things that came to mind when I was thinking about you. One is that you strike me as someone, and I know a few people in my life who are like this, and I am one of them, who cannot, let it rest. Since Trump got elected, I have been completely immersed in politics, except for breaks when I was going through personal stresses, for example. And I was like, I can't think about Trump and MAGA right now. I just can't, I've got enough. And then when I go and take breaks, literally go on vacation, go on a road trip, go on a retreat, just to get my mind off of it. But one of the reasons I'm on social media is because I'm like, what is going on? I've been on high alert since 2016. And I get the sense that you're like that. I know a lot of women who are like that. I know that there are probably a lot of men as well. But I mean, it's just a certain personality type, right? Would you say that you have a kind of what do you think that is, that some people are just like, I mean, the sense for me is I can't let this rest until it's over, until we fix it.
Yeah. I think it's a sense of vigilance.
Yeah.
It is a sense of being on high alert, and I think for a really good reason.
Yeah.
And then I also have found, I think there's something, I don't want to say addictive, but I really enjoy political engagement. I enjoy politics, and then we live in a world where it's readily available all the time. So that it's sort of a confluence of factors. But yes, I am like you. I can't let it go. I'm angry. I'm really angry. And it is so I am busy making sure that these people don't win. And I think that, they are busy 24/7. And so I sort of feel like I have to be as well. Yeah,
right.
For sure.
We're talking to Jess Craven, who writes a Substack called Chop Wood, Carry Water, with daily actions for working for our democracy and to defeat the MAGA movement. She's also on TikTok and Instagram at Jess Craven 101. Folks, feel free to call in. Jess Craven has a wealth of information in her brain and at her fingertips. And so if you have any questions about MAGA, we're going to get more into the content of our political situation and all the different issues that we're dealing with. But if you want to call in, some of you already know the number, but please feel free, 831-900-5773, 831-900-5773, or you can text us now on the app. If you have the app on your phone, and we'll get an email here, or you can just use good old-fashioned email on air at ksqd.org, on air at ksqd.org. We're going to have to take a break pretty soon, but I wanted to start the conversation about, I guess, the Democrats, because I think there are these mixed messages about the Biden administration. I have a lot of friends who are leftists who are incredibly critical, and I've been critical, right, of like allowing for fracking and building up, the fossil fuel infrastructure in our country and so on. But at the same time, we have the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. We have Build Back Better, which actually is really promoting, green energy and so on and so forth. We have Noam Chomsky saying that this is one of the most progressive presidents he's more progressive than, he's surprised by how progressive Biden has been. And so I think there's some confusion, and you're progressive. So tell me what you think about the Biden administration. Like, how progressive have they actually been? And if they have been not so great, why do you think that is?
Well, I think that, yes, largely overall, they have been extremely progressive. I am a climate activist. So as I've said many times before, I've never seen climate legislation of any kind pass in my lifetime. And when the IRA passed, I pretty much fell on my knees in amazement because, first of all, I know how high the stakes are and how badly we needed that and more, but also the chances of that legislation getting passed in this slim of a majority with Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema in the Senate they were basically impossible.
Yeah.
And I've just finished reading Robert Caro's 4-book biography of Lyndon Johnson. And in reading those, you really realize how much it takes to actually get legislation passed and how critically important it is that not only you have the goodwill, but you have the ability to execute that that goodwill. And if you don't have the ability to get it done, it doesn't really matter what you say. And Biden is someone who actually was able to fulfill a great deal of the promises he made. And I think not only on climate, although, absolutely, the drilling and all of those things I find quite disheartening. But the climate legislation that he got, the sort of transition to clean energy we are making, is a sort of snowball that will build momentum and carry itself down into the next administrations, unless, of course, we get a Trump who will just stop the snowball completely.
Yeah, I know.
But also on the Federal Trade Commission, what he's doing with monopolies, I think, is one of the great unsung bits of sort of amazing progressive progress that he's made with Lina Khan, suing Google, suing Amazon. Nobody talks about this stuff, but it is massively important and very progressive.
Yeah. We actually interviewed Brendan Ballou, the author of Plunder, who actually works for the DOJ under Biden, although he doesn't speak for the DOJ when he's interviewed, but he's going after private equity firms, in his book, big time. Yes. And I imagine they're doing that at the DOJ as well.
Yeah, they are. And these are the kinds of things. I mean, I think that the problem with Biden is that he is achieving progressive policy through sort of back channel stuff, through executive orders and through policy changes and rule changes. And it's not stuff that the average American can see or understand. So I, for example, have a relative who is also, as some of your friends, very far left. He's very concerned with Israel and Gaza. So he despises Biden, which is fine. Like, I respect that standpoint. But he says that Biden has accomplished nothing. And part of that is because he's just angry at him. And I really get the anger. But it's also because it is very hard to find Biden's accomplishments because they're in the weeds. But it doesn't make them any less massive. And I think that we take them for granted at our, I don't want to say at our peril, but at our loss, because huge things are happening and most people simply don't know it. Yeah. And it would be nice to celebrate it a bit more than we do.
Yeah, we are talking to Jess Craven. She is the author of a very popular Substack, which is a newsletter platform called Chop Wood, Carry Water. You can just actually jump on Substack. You don't need to pay. You don't have to have an account to find people's Substacks and just search up Chop Wood, Carry Water. Jess Craven also has a huge Instagram and TikTok account, and she's been giving everybody the 411 about what's going on since November of 2016. I want to talk a little bit more about what you think has been done that is progressive. And also, people talk about Biden and Harris being very pro-union. What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's another area where we have the National Labor Relations Board, and we have an acting chair there. He hasn't been able to get her confirmed because Republicans hate her.
Yeah.
But they have been jaw-droppingly pro-union. And I have a very close friend who is a union lawyer, and he just is constantly saying, people don't understand. People don't understand how huge these things are that they are doing. And again, they're like rule changes, and they're, I'm not an expert on labor policy, so it's hard for me to sort of bam, 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 and name all the policies, but these are very big deals. It is not an accident that unions are having a sort of a heyday right now. And we have to remember, too, the Trump administration was one of the most anti-union administrations we have seen in a really long time. Of course, Reagan was also, Republicans in general are very anti-union. And I think you can say that without sounding partisan. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
But what has happened with unions under the Biden administration, him walking on the picket line, but more than that, the things that the NLRB are doing behind the scenes they're stratospheric, and that is progressive. Passing the first gun legislation in 30 years, and not just that, but getting an actual chair to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, which hasn't been done in 17 years. They could not confirm somebody to that position, and they finally have. Opening up the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, never been done. And actually, again, I was talking to David Hogg about this. I was at an event with him recently. David Hogg, of course, survivor of the Parkland shootings. And he was saying it's hard because you can't prove a negative, right? Like, it's really hard to say to people, you don't understand how many mass shootings Biden's policies have likely prevented, but they have.
Wow.
And it's really, and we know that gun violence rates have gone down. We know violent crime has gone down. It just in staggering percentages. But again, we're not hearing about it. And that's, for one thing, because Fox News is just churning out over and over again lies that it's going up. And you just need to Google it. It's really easy to find the facts, but people are not always going to do that. So they don't know that, like, crime rate wise, we are doing so much better than we have in a very, very long time. I think it's 50-year lows right now. So, and economic policy, too. It's just, there have been all of these small ways that they have been trying to chip away at things that are expensive for consumers, junk fees, and, a million small things like that. He's actually tried very hard to go against price gouging. And it's a really thorny thing to counteract when you've got Republican stacked judges in courts who keep sort of overruling good policy to stop this kind of thing. So it's thorny and difficult, but I see him really trying.
Yeah.
And I wish people could see all of that stuff a little bit more easily. I understand he is not perfect, and he's done some really, in my view, he's made some big mistakes, but I would also argue that overwhelmingly he's been a phenomenal president and has passed a whole bunch of very progressive policy that most people are unaware of.
I was wondering wondering, after he was inaugurated, after the insurrection, he really inherited such a god-awful mess. I mean, the country was so divided. And I think he was trying to set a tone of like, I'm not going to be, so far left, at least overtly in public, that we further divide, but I'm going to, keep doing these things. And so, I feel like it's just so difficult in that position after we were literally, saw people attack the Capitol, too. Yeah. I mean, and I'm laughing, but people died, it was terrible. And I thought he's really got to play a certain role right now.
Yeah. And he has. Mm-hmm. I feel he has. I feel that he's been, I mean, again, setting aside the Israel-Palestine conflict, which is, I keep hearing sort of the voice of my relative in my head who does not agree that he's been a unifier because he's angry about that situation. So excising that from the conversation, he has been, for our country, for domestic purposes, a unifier. I mean, to the extent that anyone can unify America right now, which is limited. Yeah. But, I think we underestimate what a big difference it makes having somebody at the top of government who is speaking calmly and kindly and insisting on saying, like, I am here for all of you, even those of you who don't like me, as opposed to a president who literally is saying, as he just said, Trump recently, if Gavin Newsom doesn't go the way I want him to, I won't give you guys firefighting support. Yeah. Like, it's a really, and there's, I think, not an accident that the crime rate spiked under Trump. Because I think that that angry energy is a real thing. It has real life consequences.
We've seen bomb threats in Springfield. We've seen the Christchurch massacre in New Zealand, where the guy cited Trump as partially inspiration. We saw the El Paso Walmart shooting, which was also, I don't know if this person explicitly cited Trump, but he cited the Great Replacement Theory. And on and on. I mean, it's terrifying. And that's the part. I'm finding it very hard because we've done a lot of shows on Palestine. We've done a lot of shows with Palestinians and student protesters, and it is like this really dark stain on the United States and its policies because of the incredible amounts of death in Gaza and now also in the West Bank. And it's hard to. I find myself getting into arguments with people on social media where I'm like, it doesn't, like, we still have to elect Harris, and part of me wants to be excited about Harris because she's a black woman, because I think she also has a good head on her shoulders and she will be kind and compassionate. But then also, a lot of leftists would say, well, how can you be at the top of a neoliberal capitalist system with, corporate oligarchy, which I think it's all true, and do any good at all. And yet I feel like actually, it's a mixed bag. Like there are good things that happen all the time, and there are terrible, horrible things that happen all the time. Yeah. And that's the way of the world. And we need to, okay, I'm on my soapbox here, I could tell. But I'm wondering what you think, because you're a progressive, but then also it's very dismaying, like the climate crisis, as we keep opening up lands for drilling. And I know some land has been protected. I don't know if you know the details of why maybe Biden felt like he had to open up land, or maybe the idea is we want to say that we're independent, for electoral purposes, right? We have independent energy production. That might be it, is what I was thinking. But in terms of the science, which the science, I know you do, like we are 30 years behind. Like we don't have time for this. Yeah. So what do you think about, so you're just like, let's just do our best and hope for the best?
Well, I'm a realist. I mean, it is simply, for me, it is there. Yes, like we have a capitalist system. I mean, I am probably more of an anti-capitalist, if you saw my lifestyle, who I actually am as a person, than almost anyone you know. Yeah. I don't like, I recognize that capitalism is the system we live in. It's fine. Capitalism is fine, but I am not a capitalist person. I don't, so I guess what I'm trying to say is I am a realist, though. So we have these two choices, right? And it's been between, it was Biden and Trump were our choices, and now it's Harris and Trump. There is no other sort of brigadoon choice out there. Even though I would like sure, I'd love that. But that is not one of our choices. So I guess it's sort of like, I'm a mom, I'm 56 years old. I feel like there are times when you talk to your kid where you're just like, here are the two choices. Like, I know that you don't like these two choices, but those are what we have.
Yeah.
And the reality is across the board, including for the situation in Israel and Palestine, Trump will be catastrophic. Trump is Netanyahu's guy.
Yeah.
And the MAGA Republicans are Netanyahu's party. Full stop. There is not a single MAGA Republican who has called for a ceasefire. Not one.
Yeah. In fact, they've called for nuclear weapons to be
used. Absolutely. No, we know what Trump is quoted as saying from the start. Harris has worked to tie Israel's hands behind its back. So I guess what I always think is look, these people who are running for president are trying to represent an entire country. They've got to thread a needle where they are trying to sort of satisfy a lot of different constituencies. And I have never been president. So I don't know what it is like to try to do that job in a way that balances a lot of different constituencies while also adhering to my ideals. I do know, again, not to keep harping on Lyndon Johnson, which my child makes fun of me for, but Lyndon Johnson is a really interesting case study because he got some of the most progressive legislation this country has ever seen passed. He passed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and I'll tell you, it seems pretty clear that Kennedy could not have gotten those passed, even though we all liked Kennedy a lot more as a person. And he was way more progressive. But Lyndon had the ability to actually get them passed, but he also did some of the most horrible things. He was basically a horrible guy. So, I guess what those books really revealed to me is, politics is complicated. It is not black and white. Politicians are not one thing or the other. It is, I want things to be simple, but they're not. And so I am living very much in the world of who are my choices? My choices are Harris or Trump. Trump, as far as I'm concerned, is the end of the world.
Yeah.
And I mean that. I mean that. It's the end of our democracy. It's the end of the world. It's the end of Palestine, for God's sake. It is the end of our climate hopes. It's very stark for me. So of course there are things about Harris I'm worried about. I'm very worried she's going to fire Lina Khan. I don't know. I mean, all I know
and
is
Lina
she
Khan
will be,
is the head of the FTC, who has been actually going after corporations in a very smart and aggressive way. She even has the admiration of, weirdly, some Republicans. Is that right?
Josh Hawley. Yes, she does. It's
Why
weird.
is that?
Because she's really good at going after corporations that are out of control.
And they agree with her.
I don't know why, Josh. I mean, Josh Hawley, I cannot explain that man to you. But I will say, I'd like to think that she won't do that, right? But I guess what I'm saying is, whoever, if Bernie Sanders were the next president, or whoever we all want them, he would break my heart. Once you are president, you are going to break people's hearts.
That's interesting.
Because you are working for an entire country. There is not, AOC would break my heart. You name the politician and they will break my heart once they are president. It is just not possible. I am one person and this country has how many, what is our population these days? There's a lot of goddamn people in this country.
250 million or something.
Right. No president is designed to tailored for me.
Yeah.
So, but Kamala Harris, this is the last thing I'll say. We can organize under her. She's my senator. We can push her.
Yeah.
And she's 70% of where we want her to be. Trump is 100,000% in the opposite direction of where we want him to be. So to me, it's just a very straightforward choice.
This is what I've been trying to tell everybody, Jess. We're talking to Jess Craven, who writes the Substack, Chop Wood, Carry Water, and has been tracking the state of our democracy and telling us what to do, helping us out with action items on Instagram and TikTok. We will be right back after this brief message.
KSQD thanks GPI Builders for supporting this program. GPI Builders is a locally owned and operated full-service construction company with more than 10 years of experience and expertise. GPI Builders specializes in home additions, ADUs, and residential remodels throughout the Bay Area. For more information, 1-800-916-8343 or gpibuilders.com. Thank you, GPI Builders, for supporting community radio, K-Squid.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Legend, and I was born as John R. Stevens from a place called Springfield, Ohio. Oh, Springfield, Ohio. You may have heard of Springfield, Ohio this week. In fact, if you watch the debate we were discussed by our presidential candidates, including a very special, interesting man named Donald J. Trump. Now, Springfield has had a large influx of Haitian immigrants who have come to our city. Now, our city had been shrinking for decades. We didn't have enough jobs. We didn't have enough opportunity. So people left and went somewhere else. So when I was there, we had upwards of 75,000 people. And in the last 5 years, we were down to like 60,000 people. But of late, during the Biden administration, there have been more jobs that opened up, more manufacturing jobs, more plants, factories that needed employees and were ready to hire people. So we had a lot of job opportunities, and we didn't have enough people in our town of 60,000 people to fill those jobs. And during the same time, there had been upheaval and turmoil in Haiti, and the federal government granted visas and immigration status to a certain number of Haitian immigrants so they could come to our country legally. And our demand in Springfield for additional labor met up with the supply of additional Haitian immigrants. And here we are. We had about 15,000 or so immigrants move to my town of 60,000. Now, you might say, wow, that's a lot of people for a town that only had 60,000 before. That's a 25% increase. That is correct. So you might imagine there are some challenges with, integrating a new population, new language, new culture, new dietary preferences, all kinds of reasons why there might be growing pains, making sure there are enough services to accommodate the new larger population that might need bilingual service providers, et cetera, et cetera. So there are plenty of reasons why this might be a challenge for my hometown. But the bottom line is these people came to Springfield because there were jobs for them and they were willing to work. And they wanted to live the American dream, just like your German ancestors, your Irish ancestors, your Italian ancestors, your Jewish ancestors, your Jamaican ancestors, your Polish ancestors, all these ancestors who have moved to this country, maybe not speaking the language that everyone else spoke, maybe not eating the same foods, maybe having to adjust, maybe having to integrate, but all coming because they saw opportunity for themselves and their families in the American dream, and they came here to do that. Some facts about immigrants. They usually do very well here. They are hardworking, they're ambitious, they commit less crime than native-born Americans, and they will assimilate and integrate in time, but it takes time. So I think all of us need to have the same kind of grace that we would want our ancestors to have when they moved here, with our Haitian brothers and sisters who move here too. And nobody's eating cats, nobody's eating dogs. We all just want to live and flourish and raise our families in a healthy and safe environment. How about we love one another? I grew up in the Christian tradition. We said to love our neighbor as we love ourselves and treat strangers as though they might be Christ. So how about we adopt that ethos when we talk about immigrants moving to our communities and don't spread hateful, xenophobic, racist lies about them. John R. Stevens from Springfield, signing off.
That was John Legend, the amazing musician. And actually, John Legend grew up in Springfield, Ohio. Who knew? And put out this video on Instagram and I believe also on TikTok about what's happening in Springfield. And some of you may know that at the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump talked about how immigrants in Springfield were eating people's pet cats and dogs. And that's become this whole big thing. And I think what people don't realize when Donald Trump says things and J.D. Vance says things and MAGA says things is that there are people who are willing to commit violence on behalf of these people. And that's called stochastic terrorism. And they will go out and either threaten people, be hostile towards people, or actually become violent towards people. And this is not what I want for my country. Now, it's interesting, Jess Craven, we are talking to Jess Craven, who is the author of the Substack called Chop Wood, Carry Water. She's an expert in what's happening in our democracy. Jess, what about immigration? Because that's another thing that I've heard leftists be critical about. I've actually been trying to get an immigration expert on the show with me. What do you think about Biden's? I mean, is it... I don't know. I mean, I feel like, we've done so much damage in these countries, Latin America and other countries, where it's really been the United States who's been messing up their countries going way back, right? Yeah. And so we should have some, I guess, humility about allowing people in, also because of the climate crisis, which is hitting these equatorial nations a lot harder, and also hitting us. But, people are in sometimes drought conditions, can't farm any longer, or running from gangs and terrible governments and so forth, running for their lives. What do you think about the Biden immigration policies and the bipartisan bill that was put forward?
Well, first of all, I really like the organization America's Voice. I think they're great for sort of, I refer to them a lot for sort of immigration-related information, and I would imagine they would probably be depicted as a progressive organization, but they have been my sort of go-to source for getting the truth about immigration. I am not an expert. I'm going to start by saying that. I think that we have not passed comprehensive immigration reform in, I don't know, what you probably know better than me, Amy. It's 30 years, 40 years. It's been a very, very long time. And what it seems to me is clear is that the border situation is broken, and that Congress, it is not the president's job to fix that with executive orders. It is Congress's job to sit down and hash out comprehensive immigration reform. And this has been attempted several times. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe every single time, and definitely the last time, it has been attempted, Republicans have killed it at the last minute. They have not been interested in actually finding solutions on this issue. And, I think that the bipartisan bill that was negotiated, I don't know that it was really that much of a bipartisan bill. I think it was largely a Republican wish list with a couple of concessions for Democrats, because I think at that moment, Democrats were willing to do just about anything to get Ukraine funding. And so they said, basically, write the bill you want. And Republicans wrote the bill they wanted. And it is harsher, probably, than most Democrats are in support of. And yet they wanted that Ukraine funding so badly. And basically, they were like, we will do anything just to get immigration reform done. And Republicans were ready to pass it. And then, of course, as you know, Donald Trump made a phone call and killed the bill. I mean, that is really what happened. I don't mean to sound so smooth and kind of smug about it, but that's what happened. That bill was written by hard right conservative Republicans, and Trump decided it would not behoove him in an election year to have it passed. And so it didn't pass. And Biden has since gone on and issued an executive order that is quite draconian. And again, I think a lot of immigration advocates have had real sadness about this executive order, but it has absolutely cut off. I mean, I think our numbers have dropped like a rock, and we are at very, very, very low crossing numbers right now. But that's not a solution. The solution is Congress sitting down in a bipartisan fashion and working out an actual solution which gives us enough judges to hear asylum cases and enough, Border Patrol agents and whatever else. Again, I'm not an expert, but I know that we need both sides to come to the table. We need it. You can't be somebody who says Democrats screwed up the border and then say, but I won't come to the table and tell you how I want it fixed. That can't work. We need two parties who are willing to work it out. And unfortunately, right now, we just don't have that. So it's a very, very difficult problem. But I do believe there are solutions. I just don't believe we can arrive at them through executive order. They're too easy to challenge in court. And that's what happened with everything Trump tried. It just got challenged in court. Congress needs to legislate. That is their job.
Okay, we have a question that just came in from the email. What does Jess think about down ballot non-presidential races? Any she finds interesting?
Oh, my God. You know, it's like I paid somebody to ask that question. That's really funny.
Did you send that question in?
Did I send that? Yes, I actually sent it. That's probably my kid in the other room sending me that question. You know, I am very passionate about this. I could talk about this for many more hours than we have here, and I'll tell you why. I'm not going to do that, though. Because down ballot races are so very, very important. And especially people on the left have neglected them. And what has ended up happening as a result of our sort of fixating on the presidency, and also, this is really interesting, Amy, I just learned about this, Democratic drop-off on the ballot. Now, this is a really interesting thing. They have done studies recently. 80% of left-leaning voters go in and fill out the top of the ticket and leave the rest blank because they're not 100% sure what's going on down there and they want to be sure. Guess who does not do that? Republicans. And guess what the result of that has been? The result of Republicans voting straight party ticket and Democrats only voting at the top because they're not 100% educated about those down ballot races. We have lost state houses. And guess what those state houses flipped to Republicans have done?
Yeah.
They have passed abortion bans. They have passed trafficking bans where women can't leave the state to get the health care they need without being chased down and charged, or their helpers charged. They have passed anti-LGBTQ bills. They have passed bad climate legislation. They have passed voter suppression bills. And that is because we have not paid attention. So the answer to the question is, I am very passionate about down ballot races, and I urge everybody to do whatever you need to do to get educated or just go in and vote straight party. My God, that's what the other side is doing. But there's a great tool called bluevoterguide.org. You can enter your address and it will help you build your entire ballot and print it out so you can go in prepared. But we really need to start voting full ticket. We need to pay attention to down ballot races because state legislatures are passing the laws that are affecting 80% of our life is determined by state legislatures, not federal.
Okay. We actually have a caller on the line with us who has a couple questions for you.
Great.
Okay, let's go. Are you there, caller?
Yeah, I am. Another great show, Amy, as always.
Thank you. Who is this?
My name is Ray.
Hi, Ray.
Hi, Ray.
Yeah. Hey, we've spoken several times before, and I wanted to say thank you for bringing up the voter suppression because that's actually what I called about, and you were on the same wavelength with me there. And I just, I've known about Greg Palast for decades, really, and
who is Greg Palast for our listeners?
Okay, Greg Palast has done all kinds of heavy investigation into voting largely in this country, but elsewhere as well. But pretty much started with the whole hanging chads and the Supreme Court giving GW the election in 2000 instead of Gore, who actually won it. But he has done a lot of investigative reporting on this for a whole long time. And he has written books and put out movies like one was called The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. And the one he's got out right now is Vigilante Inc., voter suppression hitmen. And I just happened to watch it last night. And it's just filled with facts and figures and a whole, history of how black people have been kept from voting and how they're being kept from voting now.
Yeah.
Even, hundreds of thousands of them have been ripped off of the voter rolls right now. And he has interviews with all kinds of people. It was a great movie, really informative, and And he's really fearless and kind of funny, and I totally recommend it to everybody. But one thing he doesn't really say is, well, what do we do about this? And, the name of your blog or your newsletter, I really love that. Chop wood, gather water, or carry water.
Yeah,
that sounds like you're very solution-oriented, and I've heard you give some solutions about other things today, and I wonder if you have any for that. What the heck do we do about all the voter suppression that's happening here now?
That is, first of all, Ray, thank you for calling in, and that is such a great question. And I do have an answer, and you're right. The name of the newsletter is about, what actions can we take? Not about worrying, but what can we do? And yeah, there is a tremendous amount of voter suppression happening now because, truthfully, Republican policies are just not popular. And that's just fact. Most Americans support abortion rights. Most Americans support taxing the wealthy. Most Americans support common sense gun reform. I could go on. They support Democratic policies, not Republican policies. So Republicans have come up with this, it's a long time solution for them of suppressing particularly the black and brown vote. But the exciting thing is that we're actually in a moment of opportunity right now. I'll talk about the election in a second, but I do want to say that Democrats, starting with Chuck Schumer, have committed that if Kamala Harris wins, we flip the House and we hold the Senate, which I really believe we can do with a wave election. The first bill they are going to take up is the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And that is a huge deal. And they have said that they are willing to carve out the filibuster to get it done. And with the senators we would have coming in, Kyrsten Sinema would be gone, Joe Manchin is gone.
Thank God.
We would have the senators, all of whom are willing to do that. So that's what I keep telling people, don't quit before the miracle. We're so close to passing major voting rights legislation. It won't be a fix-all. We will still have to contend with the Supreme Court, and there will be work to do. But that will be so huge. So we just need to win this election. And then in the immediate term, I have been making voter protection calls with the DNC, and they're looking for tons of volunteers to help. We're calling into Georgia right now because Georgia has made millions of voters, has switched their registration from active to inactive. And they've done it in a really sneaky fashion. It doesn't mean they can't vote, but it means it's going to be much easier to challenge their votes. And so what we are doing is scrambling to call as many voters as we can to tell them to contact their registrar or go online to whatever, vote.org or any reputable voter registration site and check their voter registration and make sure it's active and not inactive. So for every, bad guy that's out there, to use sort of an old colloquialism, there is a helper as well. And what I remind people is look for the helpers and then go help them. So the DNC is doing voter protection. There are amazing groups all over the country that are talking to voters, registering voters, calling voters, helping them vote. And we just have to help those organizations. That's all we can do is get on the team of the helpers and help.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. But also wondering about, you brought up the challenging of the votes, too, because he talks a lot about that and interviewed a woman who challenged 32,000 votes, and he totally puts her on the spot, and she ends up throwing him out of her house. Because, he's asking people, so why are you doing this? Have you ever met any of these people? Do you know anything about them? And, one of them was a major in the Army who's an expert on new technologies, and they wiped him off the voter rolls. And, but a lot of this has been sanctioned not only in Georgia, but they're kind of the heart of this movie. And
so, Ray, do you have a question about this?
Well, yeah, I'm just kind of wondering, is there something we can do to actually fight back with them? How do we get, how do we get them, all the people who've been disenfranchised there, to be re-enfranchised in the next 49 days or 59 days? What is it?
Well, I think that's what she was saying, that we can actually call Georgia voters.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
Ray.
you so much. Just because we're getting to the top of the hour. You also, by the way, I have to say, you're listening to 89.5, 89.7, and 90.7 FM KSQD radio for the California Central Coast. We're talking to Jess Craven, who is an expert on all things democracy and Democrats and also the GOP. She has a Substack called Chop Wood, Carry Water. Did you want to add to what you answered, Ray, about how do we fight back on voter suppression?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess what I want to say is that one part of the GOP tactic, one part of their voter suppression is a sort of psychological operation where they are throwing so much at the wall, knowing that it dispirits people on the other side. So, yeah, they are definitely actually removing people from the rolls and making people inactive. And we are working on those things, and everybody should join us. And everybody should be checking their voter registration once a week between now and when they vote.
Especially in swing states.
Especially in swing states or southern states. I mean, in California, I don't really feel the need to do that. If you're in a state with same-day voter registration, it's probably okay, but these states don't have that. But the other thing is to remember that Republicans want you to despair. They want you to give up. They want you to feel like they're too awful, they're too evil, they're too powerful, they're going to win. What's the point? And it's not true. We can absolutely beat them. It is really crappy that we have to do this kind of work, but we do. I'm going to accept it today, and I am going to fight to win these elections in a wave election so that we don't have to do it tomorrow. And this is a justice issue. These are people, I don't need to talk about the history of slavery and voter disenfranchisement in this country and Jim Crow. We all know the history. It's outrageous, and it's been going on for too long. It's sickening. But it is our turn to pick up the burden of fighting for justice and equality and everybody having an equal say in this democracy and carrying that, that progress a little further.
Yeah.
And that's just what we have to do. I get to do that. It is an honor to be fighting on the right side. Yeah. And I think we just have to look at it that way.
And the other thing that I think is happening, too, people don't understand what the Russians have been doing. I believe also Iran and China, but a lot from Russia, overwhelming amounts of propaganda and disinformation, Twitter accounts. I mean, going back to 2014 and even before, especially in 2016. It's all in the Mueller report. No one reads that. I have actually read it. And there was a lot going on, and there still is. We now have Elon Musk, who's become like a full-blown right-wing fascist, as far as I'm concerned. And there, one of the messages is it doesn't matter. Your vote doesn't matter. Both sides are the same. That is part of the Russian propaganda. Yep. And so I want to I made a big list this morning. I'm just going to read a few things off of what Republicans have been doing. Feel free to add, Jess, as I go through this, what they've been saying, what they've been doing. Donald Trump, in terms of activism, he has said he will deport activists. I have no idea where he's going to deport them to, because he's talking about citizens and residents who live here. Shooting activists in the legs was an idea he had during BLM protests in Washington, D.C. He wants to give blanket immunity to police officers for any crimes that they commit on the job, including homicide, banning Muslims. We know that from the Muslim ban. We know Jared Kushner has said that Gaza is prime beachfront property.
Yep.
And Kushner is very, very close with Netanyahu. They stay at each other's homes when they're traveling. Using the DOJ to go after political opponents and anyone that, this is the plan. They have said these things. Mass deportation of immigrants, intentional cruelty to migrants, we saw with the family separation policy from Stephen Miller. Here was a Republican in Florida who said that he wants to suspend and possibly terminate habeas corpus.
Yeah.
Which is, our protections, in the judicial system to not just get thrown in jail without due process. Do you have any comments? We have 5 minutes left. I want to make sure we give people resources before we have to close out.
Okay. I would just add to that, privatizing Medicare is a big one that they're very bent on doing, raising the retirement age for Social Security. And also, Trump wants to put these 10 to 20 to 60% tariffs across the board on all imported goods. And really, again, anybody can do the research on this. Economists from across the political spectrum are like, this is going to be catastrophic for consumers. depending on who you ask, it is going to add $2,000 to $4,000 a year to the average American's expenses, right? And then also deporting 11 million undocumented people, setting aside the human rights issues of putting those people in camps, separating families, coming into our towns and cities with the military to drag them out of their homes, which is all part of the plan. But what that is going to do to our economy and the price of food and the price of everything else, because we will not have construction workers, we will not have people to work in food, we will not have people to work in hospitality. It is unbelievable to me that people are still saying that Republicans are better on the economy when this is the plan. But all of that aside, I will also just say the abortion, I can't express enough, and this is really my last thing, is that I know this is a California station, and most of the people listening are in California, and I hear people say all the time, well, we're in a blue state, so I know we're going to be safe. And I cannot emphasize enough that should Trump win, there will not be blue states anymore.
Yeah. And we don't know what's happening in red states. But women are bleeding out, as Kamala Harris said. I mean, thousands of women have commented on one TikToker who's a MAGA guy, John McEntee's TikTok post, where they were like, they are not able to get health care when they're miscarrying, when their fetuses are in distress. It is horrifying what's happening for women and for people who get pregnant in these countries. Really quickly, because we might have a little bit of extra time, RFK Jr. going to the Trump camp, Jill Stein, West, any comments, any thoughts? Is that affecting us now, RFK Jr. going to the Trump camp?
All three of these candidates, as far as I'm concerned, are, I don't want to say that they're all working for the Republicans, but they are definitely all being used by the Republicans. They're being funded by the Republicans. RFK Jr.'s biggest donor was Timothy Mellon, who is Trump's biggest donor. Mellon is also maxed out to Cornel West. All of these Republican donors are maxing out to Jill Stein because they know if they're going to win, it's going to be because of third-party candidates. And for me, it's hard for me not to feel rage, honestly, at these people for staying in the race at this moment. Yeah. Because numerically, mathematically impossible for any of them to win. Obviously, not to mention Jill Stein doesn't even know how many members of Congress we have. She has no idea how the government works. Cornel West, I used to have a great deal of respect for. It's really sad for me to see what he is doing. But these people can throw the election to Trump. Biden won by 46,000 votes. In 2020, we are talking minuscule margins that absolutely a third-party candidate can take and hand the election to Trump. So having a trans child, I can't believe I said daughter. My child is non-binary. Having a trans child, knowing that the climate crisis is where it is, knowing what will happen to 11 million undocumented people and all of the other people who will suffer, black and brown people, I can't believe people are willing to put their vote onto a candidate who will essentially hand their vote to Trump. I find it, I'm sorry, it's really hard for me not to be upset about it because my child's future is at stake. Yeah.
Well, Jess Craven, we're going to have to wrap it up. We're near the top of the hour. We've been speaking to Jess Craven, who has a Substack called Chop Wood, Carry Water. You can go to that Substack and find out all kinds of things to do. She will give you action items nearly every day. She's on Instagram. She's on TikTok as Jess Craven 101. Is that true for TikTok as well?
Yeah, it's all Jess Craven 101.
Yeah, and if you want to get involved just right now, go to Swing Left, Force Multipliers, showing up for racial justice. Swing Left is organizing Get Out the Vote canvassing operations in Nevada, Arizona, and elsewhere, and local teams go out together. They are probably the most active group in Santa Cruz County. Also in Monterey, we have the Democratic Women's Club at dw-mc.org. They have a whole list of groups that you can get involved with to get out the vote. And these next, literally, less than 50 days until the election in San Benito. I couldn't find anything in San Benito, so shoot me an email at amy@ksqd.org to tell me where are the good groups in San Benito County. And thank you so much, Jess Craven, for joining us.
Amy, thank you. This has been such a delightful conversation. And you guys, we can do this. Don't quit before the miracle. Please join us in the work, and we can do this.
Thank you. On the next Moment of Truth, a special 2-hour episode delving into why the Grants Pass versus Johnson Supreme Court decision matters for all of us. Ed Johnson, the attorney for the unhoused before the Supreme Court, and Grants Pass, Oregon residents, as well as other experts, break down how this Supreme Court case could shape the way cities decriminalize homelessness. From landmark decisions to real-world impact, our guests explain what it means for your community. Tune in to learn what's next. October 7th, starting at 5 p.m. for a 2-hour special of Moment of Truth. Don't miss it. Thanks to our Moment of Truth team, Nyanko Nyasu, Mailing Obinata, Vara Ramakrishnan, Todd Zimmerman, and Joy Schendeldecker. Thanks to Howard Feldstein and the entire KSQD team on the California Central Coast. Find us on Discord or on social media at Amy Chen Mills on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. Also, watch out for our new Substack coming out just ahead of the election. Listen to all our past shows at your podcast sites on Apple, YouTube, and Spotify, and on the new KSQD app. Please support us by rating us and leaving your review. Shoot us an email at amy@ksqd.org with questions or comments. And if you need to know where you can plug in to help out with the coming election, shoot us an email and we will get back to you as soon as possible. And remember, if we don't use our democracy, we lose our democracy.